Ah, fuck it. I don't know what the hell today is going to bring. What I do know is that I'm feeling loose and weird. And weird in a way that I haven't felt in a long time. And see, I guess I'm going to tell a little bit of a story. A little bit of a story. There was a period after my time in the forest, after about a year of really digging in deep. And the YouTube channel was a big part of that, actually. Um, where I found myself in this place where it was just me being. This was just before Celeste, came into the world. Well, a little bit before Celeste came into the world, and it was just obvious, and I was very relaxed and very content, and I thought I was crazy. It scared the shit out of me. It actually terrified me a little bit. Like I was just walking around in this state of kind of like I'm good with everything, and it wasn't like there wasn't challenges or anything like that. It was just like, yeah, I got this. This is fine. This is just me. And then all of a sudden, just one after another, weird shit started to happen. My life imploded for various different reasons, and all involving the weird narrative that I had tied myself to, and had still yet to process. So it was interesting because while I was in that state, I'm like, oh, I can't just live like this. I've got to be crazy. I should go deal with some shit. And so I created a whole hellstorm for myself in this urge to go back and find something to deal with, almost to pull away from this state that feels very, very different from the state that I grew up in as I went through the schooling system and into the workforce and all of that. But I find myself back there, not back there, but in a state that's very similar, except now I find there's a gap between oh my God, this is so different, and the temptation to run from it because it's so different. And it's because I guess I've just been kind of circling around this in my own time, thinking that I was still dealing with things, not recognizing that the things that I was dealing with were actually a way of me gradually working my way back here where it wasn't so jarring, gradually working my way towards a state of clarity that I could reconcile I had worked my way to. I could find it, oddly enough, a logical trajectory to how I got here. It wasn't quite so like you went from like hell to heaven. It's like, fuck, am I supposed to be here? Am I crazy? What the hell is happening? Right. And so it's like, well, I'll just go back to hell and leave myself a trail of breadcrumbs so I can explain how I got back here. And so it's so very interesting because sometimes we can feel like we're still stuck in the shit, not recognizing that we're doing that to give ourselves a little bit more time to get familiar with the shit, to get familiar with not having the shit, and to maybe say our goodbyes to the shit, to maybe reconcile, how much of a part of our life it's been for so long, and to be able to just peacefully let it go, just because we recognize its purpose, as opposed to try to escape from it. Kind of like an old friend. It's like, thank you for keeping me lost in bullshit while I was trying to deal with other things. And so I just wanted to bring that up because that's very much how I'm feeling at the moment. A little crazy, but crazy in the way that there is no such thing. That in fact there are just people doing their best to try and figure out what it is to exist, and we are all subject to the infinite spectrum of our mind, of our awareness, right? And so we're all in this together, and we're all on the same fucking level. It's just really important to recognize that. Don't take yourself too seriously because you don't necessarily know what's happening, but you do know that you are growing because you are growth.
That was very well said, man. I think I resonated with about every bit of it, and the component of getting familiar with a certain, you know, experience, different experience that seems like something you almost lost, that childlike sort of wonder of the world, but then it's it's like the back and forth, and then you start to feel each and every at each and every point, like, why that went away, like, why that state didn't make as much sense, but then you're shown things that were components of the reason that then held you off from other aspects, say on the side of responsibility, for example, because that is the difference between childhood and adulthood, is taking responsibility for yourself, for your life, which comes in so many ways that I haven't even feel like I've seen until the last 2 or 3 days. The sides of just how much we can get caught up in not living for ourselves, whatever that means, looking to someone for how to act, looking to someone for the right thing to say, like hardly trusting ourselves. And then you're shown, when maybe you did trust yourself more, but were taking in so much that it was like building being yourself. But then you start looking at how to do things right and correctly, and you kind of work your way out of that experience, but you stop taking, or you never end up taking responsibility for your experience so much. And there's ideas that are built on top, and ideas about the world and the way things work and the things that happen, and they go on, and we build a narrative around that, where our place in the world is relative to everyone else, how we're doing relative to everyone else. And there is no everyone else, and there is no how we're doing. And without those, there isn't a bar that you can look at when you're feeling down in order to feel better. Like fucking build some muscle. So if you're feeling down, you take a peek in the mirror and flex a little bit, and you're like, yeah, I feel better now. Like, or just go to the gym so that next time you look, you do feel better. And it's like all of these subtle little ways that we can turn our attention away from when we're not feeling great, as opposed to looking at maybe why we don't feel great. We just look away from that and look towards something else, or recognize even what's going on in our life as it's happening, what's really playing out. And so, in moments where, you know, maybe some labels go away, some thoughts, some assumptions about yourself, about the world, about other people drop, you see things for what they are. You see other people closer to for what they are, not necessarily as they are, but just different perspectives of from the one that you've always had. You see maybe some of the reasons for certain actions and ways of living and choices, and an unwillingness to see the potential, and maybe their unwillingness to see the potential damage of satisfying certain things, where they aren't willing to look beyond themselves in certain ways, and taking an honest look at the reality of situations. And, most people don't want to look beyond themselves. They don't want to look beyond what they want, what feels good to them, what makes them feel better. And so they don't factor in everyone's perspectives. We don't see beyond ourself and the narrative we build there, and the one we build to counteract the old one maybe we used to have. It's instead of maybe looking at the old one and like, well, you know what? Maybe that wasn't true either. And then you don't need that thing, that other weight that you hold on to in order to feel better, to counteract that other thing that you're looking at. But you can't look at the other one without letting go of the one on top, and then maybe some of the reasons that came from. And I am just shooting from the absolute hip, dude, because I am feeling fucking humbled as shit, and just faced with so many fucking things, and weight, and like self-honesty, and like, you gotta just laugh. You gotta laugh.
Oh,
But
I'm definitely glad we're talking about this,
okay. Yeah, me
because
too, man.
you see, you're looking at it as humble. And that's a great perspective because that's usually what happens when all of a sudden you realize how little you know. Because that's really it. You're all of a sudden you go from, oh yeah, I've got some insecurity and I've got an anxiety problem, and maybe I got a bit of an anger issue, to, oh shit, there's like a whole web behind each of those things. Like they're all connected in infinite different ways throughout time, right? And you're just like, what the fuck? And I keep adding to it, and that's it. It's all of a sudden you're in awe of how complex you are, right? I was I was having a conversation with a counselor friend last night, and it was really interesting because we were comparing responses between ChatGPT asking about how do I reduce my response to my triggers, and the Dualistic Unity Life Troubleshooter's response to how do I stop responding to my triggers. And it was really interesting because ChatGPT said, identify your triggers, right? And of course, my counselor friend's like, yeah, that's exactly what we do. We identify what the trigger is, right? That way we can address the trigger and we can learn how to cope with the trigger, which is another thing. Whereas good old Dualistic Unity Life Troubleshooter doesn't look at it that way at all. It doesn't say identify your trigger. What it encourages you to do is continue to self-reflect, because the difference there is that you are going to settle on a specific problem. That is the problem. That is the root of the problem. You're going to find your quote unquote trigger, instead of recognizing there are infinite triggers. All the triggers are actually just common responses to reality, right? Responses that have a consequence. And so if you ever come to one, you're like, that's the problem. You're in for a world of shit, because you're going to continue to suffer for different reasons, not recognizing there were other things behind that. There were things that led to that. Like there was the trigger, and then there was the precursor to that trigger that led to the trigger, and then the precursor to the trigger that led to that trigger. And it continues to spiral that way in this mad domino game, right? And it's just and it just cascades throughout your life. And so things are really complex. And when you start to get your head out of your ass and stop thinking about yourself, like thinking about yourself as somehow the way to see reality, you start to recognize how much you haven't been looking at, like just how much you've just blinded yourself to. And again, and I'd like to point out, of necessity to some degree, because for a long time we were blinded by, frankly, the conditioning of the mentality around us. Think like this: we all have tunnel vision. You're going to master tunnel vision, right? And that's pretty much the societal banner. This way towards tunnel vision. Don't look around. Look that way, right? And so all of a sudden, you come out of that. You start to question that. You start to see that, and you go, "Fuck, there's more." And your honest intention changes from not becoming more, but to just being what you are, to recognizing how much that is, to just looking at where you are, when you are here and fucking now. That drive in you changes. And that's all that's necessary. See, from there, the rest takes care of itself. From there, it has its own gravity. Awareness becomes self-refining. It's just the intention. The intention changes, right? And there's no way to make that intention change. There's no way to convince someone they should change their intention. It has to honestly just come from being in the fog long enough, being in the shit long enough to go, it's gotta be like, hold on. I'm picking up a fucking pattern here, right? And then all of a sudden, of your own volition, you are looking as opposed to just trying to get through, right? But in that looking, you start to see. And when you really start to see, it's a lot. That's what a psychedelic trip feels like. So all of a sudden, it's like all of your whole mind just gets opened wide up, and you're like, oh my fucking God. That's all the time, right? That's all the time, except we go back to just our assumptions. We go back to our comfortable narratives. We go back to our story, because it limits all of that down to a comfortable amount that we can deal with while we go to our 9 to 5, right? While we deal with the other people around us who aren't walking around with their eyes just fucking wide open and their mouth agape, like, oh, what? But as much, I guess my point is, as much as it's humility, it's also what I mean by being awestruck. Reality is quite literally awesome, worthy of awe. And when you really see it, it's very hard not to walk around feeling like that all the time.
Oh, yeah, and especially, mm, like, feeling like you're looking into your own mind in a sense, but you're still you, and I'm starting to get a sense for, the shit, going through the shit, getting your perspective opened up because it's informative. It's it's incredibly informative, and so, like, almost shifting from not feeling like you have to prioritize yourself, as you said, it's like that's it right there, and then your eyes are open and you're interacting with people entirely differently. You're not holding yourself back so much because you know that you're just interacting with yourself, and that informs a sensitivity, so it's like you're not holding yourself, and I'm just, obviously talking about myself as always, you're not holding yourself back so much because there isn't so much of a good reason to, and you're willing to just express whatever is there, but there's so much more. It's like shifting from, because it feels childlike in a lot of ways when I'm just expressing myself as opposed to holding myself back. But now there's a sensitivity because before it was like, say now versus childhood, it's like knowing you're more interacting with yourself. It's not so much about me, and that's where the trap kinda seems to come in when it's like there's the priority or even just looking at reality, and, that sense that you kinda talked about your mind getting turned inside out and just looking at all of these components and pieces, like, I've been feeling a lot of that recently, and it's very, very difficult to put into words, and, like, I've been when I look to, try to even reach back to a perspective of myself that I used to maybe buoy, or like a thing, a statement, like I feel like I've never actually spoken for myself, and I know this is just, again, just me probably going overboard with that, and as I'm talking, I'm like, why am I even telling a story at all? It's like I'm just expressing something here, and it's but there is, and so I'll just finish with that. Like, there is a sense that I feel like I've always mirrored my reality instead of being it. Like, everything I've said, even I've noticed, like, fucking dude, I noticed on an episode we recorded like 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't even react until I saw you react in a couple cases, and I was like, "Oh, Andrew, come on, dude, you can respond how you wanna respond." You can let out a chuckle when you wanna let out a chuckle. You don't have to look to someone else to figure out what the right thing to do is, the right thing to say is. Like, you're fucking reality, man. I'm reality, man. Like, I can have push without looking or waiting to find out what the thing to do is, and I swear to God, dude, I'm fucking 28. I feel like I've never done that in my entire life. Not like once.
That was the insight that changed my life, Andrew. I've explained this exactly like that. I suddenly realized that I had always been living relative to everyone else. I was always living within their world. How would they perceive it? How would they look at it? What would they do? Where do I fit in their life? I had never done anything for me. It had never come down to just me. And it was jarring as fuck. It really was. And it always, because all of a sudden you're just like, whoa, what do I think? What's my response to this? And everything starts to change, but then your tone starts to change too, which is what you've been kind of going through. All of a sudden, you're going through your own process to recognize you are your own process. And that's ultimately it. You just arrive. And then suddenly you're in your body, you're in your life, and you're like, ah. I can do what I want. I don't have to agree with that. In fact, fuck you. And you can do, and it really just comes down to you being you. There's no more to it. There's no philosophy. There's no, there's nothing. There's no need to intellectualize it. It really just comes down to the recognizing freedom. And once you recognize freedom and the awesome responsibility that goes with that, because the responsibility is your response, not your response relative to how you perceive reality, but your response as reality. And it's a very different experience. And it takes some time, but it is a beautiful experience once you start to recognize it. It's just so jarring because all of a sudden it's like somebody just dumped you into a new world. They're like, figure it out. And you're like, hold up. I'm not sure how to feel about this. And I'm like, all right, bye.
What do I do with my hands, man? What do I do with my hands? But holy fuck, like that, and you've said that before, and there's been, and you've explained that story like, "Oh, I've never lived for me." And I've felt like variations of that, I guess, and, it's always feels brand new every single time, and each time it's like, a rotation around it's like an unraveling in a lot of ways once you stop investing so heavily, and yet at the same time you feel like you're not, and you still are in a lot of ways, but it's not even it's not a black and white thing. Like, none of it's black and white, none of it's as fucking simplistic as I want to think that it is in my head right now. It's not as this just edged thing. It's like it's this, it's that, it's this, it's because it's not that at all. Like, it really is just trusting yourself, having faith in yourself, jumping into things, and like the realization that every situation, you go into, every situation, there's not a fucking blueprint. Like, there's not a how-to guide. There's not a set of directions. There's not a this thing happens in this way and means this, and when you do this thing, you start with this and then do this and then do this. Like, I don't I don't know if I've ever got into something without some bit of an idea, and I get that there's, those ideas are gonna come in variations, and there'll be leftovers, but I've had some experiences more recently where I don't feel that as much, and, like, there's shit that I say, and, like, there's stuff for me to say, and when I'm not, like, shelling up and holding myself back, like, I can be talkative. I can be very talkative when I'm not doing that, and yet, like, as soon as there's, like, a thought about me, I can't figure it out. I'm like, "I gotta figure this out now," and then it's just like, fucking, instead of just being it and not thinking about myself so much, like, just fucking interacting with reality, like, right here, right now, without wondering, like, "How's it going now? How's it going now?" Like, "How'd that go? How do I say this and make sure I do this and that?" And it's like, oh, if I have actual sensitivity to what's going on, and, like, I'm willing in to factor things, which again, you gotta fucking see stuff and see things in yourself to factor in more. Like, you can only know what you know, you can only see what you've seen, you can only see, and so fucking I appreciate you a lot, man, because, like, and this whole fucking everything that Dualistic Unity is, everyone listening right now, watching, anyone who's been to a retreat, like, you've shown me so much of reality that I would never have seen if I hadn't even I don't even know, dude. Like, if I had stayed on the track I was on in a lot of ways. like, whatever the fuck that was, which again, it's like I'm envisioning this track towards something, and it was just me the whole time. It was just me, being influenced or being influence as I went, and it's just been a lot on the side of being influenced and, like, being a fucking good boy about it, and just, like, doing as I'm fucking told, doing what's gonna, appease people. What do I think's gonna appease people most? Let me calculate that real quick and do my best to fucking match it instead of dropping that shit and just, like, looking around, taking a good look at, like, what's going on, like, what's actually going on, and being willing to look at it. And, again, as I feel like I'm caught in shit, it's like I'm just holding myself back from, like, having any degree of influence over that, and whatever that means, like, oh, dude.
I love you, man.
Thank
uh,
you.
and again, I don't mean to laugh at your expense. It's just happening that way, and it's just because I've been through it, and I know it's good for you. At the end of the day, I mean, it's so funny because it's like we have this different relationship with what I lovingly refer to as the wall, right? Like we're like, oh God, wow, I'm caught up in so much shit. I just need to let go of this. I just need to be here. This is just a practice. This is also fucking clear to me now. That's it. All right. And then we start thinking, how are we going to do that? And the shit starts all over. And that's the whole point. Is that what's happening? Because everybody wants to get to this point where it's just like, I know. I'm no longer lost in my shit. It's never going to happen again. Right? It's learning to not take it seriously. It's learning not to react to it. Like what you're getting right now is a real clear look at how much you've invested in shit that ultimately doesn't matter. After this period of clarity, all that shit's going to come clamoring back in and tempt you like, but we kind of matter. Pay attention to us a little bit. What about them? What about your future? What about that sense of control? And it all kind of comes settling back in. And you're like, no, I see that this time. I see that a bit more this time. And I see that a bit more this time. And the reason is because of these moments of clarity where you get a good, hard fucking look at exactly how stupid this shit is. Like you really do. All of a sudden, you're just like, wow, I am really making this hard. And it's just an honest look without judgment. It's just the recognition. There are some things that I'm invested in that I don't necessarily need to be doing. And so recognizing that next time they come up, you go, I don't necessarily need to be doing that. And the only thing that's changed is your belief in it. The only thing that's changed is your level of commitment to those things, to those thoughts, to thought as a whole, to measuring your progress at all. Like that's the thing. It's one thing to say, well, my progress isn't measurable. How am I doing on that? Right. And so it's just the recognition. It's the pendulum swinging, right? Until finally you're just talking over and over again. You're like, I get it. I get it. I'm not going to think about it anymore. And then you find yourself just being. That's it. That's all it is. And it's a practice. It's a practice. It's something that reality is going to continue to reflect opportunities for you to work through. Right. And that's kind of the thing that you were like, I look back and I'm like, oh my God, what if I had never seen this? What if I had never met DU? What if I'd never had this conversation? It's like, how do you know that could have happened at all? How do you know that you weren't always on this path? Again, the dominoes cascading, each and every opportunity, each and every conversation, each and every person. And it was all just exactly reflective of your intention to change, your intention to question, and your willingness to let go of what you had previously done. And if you look back at your life, that's exactly what it is. All of a sudden, just your intention just changed by shades through different things fucking up, the different commitments going wrong, different fucking times where you're just like, I'm so fucking tired, I give up. And in the giving up, you were willing to explore a different path. In the giving up, you were like, oh, fuck, well, okay, now I got to reassess my reality. And in that willingness, your direction changed, your intention changed until eventually you were willing to stand on your own. And that's what this insight is. Oh shit, it's just me. It's just my life. It's not that we were ever like stopped or limited from recognizing that. It's just a lot. It's just a lot when you've spent your whole life with a society around you that's like, you're a part of this. You're a part of this. That was the big thing about that whole COVID thing, right? Or about the idea about vaccination. It's like we are all collectively responsible for one another. Hold up, that there seems like the path to fucking stupidity. Because if we're all collectively responsible for one another, then we can really get caught up in mob think or in group think and mob mentality, right? Whereas everybody is individually responsible, we have to have a dialogue based on responsibility. And that changes everything. And that's what the system was ultimately bitching about. It's like, no, there are experts. Listen to them. Shut the fuck up. And it's like, okay, well, let's talk about all of that. And that was where it got really weird, right? Because they're like, well, no, look, the science backs that up. And people are like, okay, well, hold up. But what about this? What about the people financing that? What's the end goal here? Well, we don't want to talk about that. Just listen to fucking scientists. And it's because there were other factors that were influencing that. There were other things about the world around us that were influencing that. And so there's such a question of individual responsibility, or rather, there's such an importance of individual responsibility simply for that fact, because that's what keeps us in check. That's what the founding fathers of the US were talking about. When I made Discover Transcendence, I went all through that shit. And it's very much liberty. It wasn't democracy, it was liberty. Liberty is your right to choose for you. That's what liberty is, right? Your right to choose for you. And that was the foundation of what the founding fathers of the US were talking about. Basing the country on the individual's rights collectively expressed, as opposed to one head of the collective dictating all the rights. Right? And that's how the states have changed over time. But it's our mentality that's changed over time. Right? We forgot the importance of responsibility. We forgot exactly how fundamental we are to our existence on this planet.
Oh, because when you sort of go through and like fucking, because it's a point of taking responsibility for yourself, for your life. And some people, maybe someone through raised situation, maybe that hit you when you were 1 years old, 2 years old. Whereas for me, took a lot longer than that. But you look through, experience and the variations, and like, it goes back, and as you said, like a mentality of not taking responsibility for yourself in varied ways, from passing it off for decision making to just not just straight up like not being responsible for yourself, being like fucking child, being a child, like not being responsible for your experience, your life as a whole. And it comes in the form of like where to look, for answers, what to believe, what to say, what to spend your fucking time doing. Like, we want to look outside of ourselves in so many ways. And that's been, you know, y- say in your own life, in your own experience, you want to find where the points were in that. So you start going back. And then it keeps going back. It keeps going back, generation after generation after generation after generation. And so it's not a fault. It's not a a thing that it's like started from someone. It's like this moment right now, as you recognize it, is it shifting. Like, you don't choose what you're born into. You don't have sway over that, but moment to moment you have opportunity to see things a little bit differently, wonder things, an opportunity to think for yourself in moments, in slight variations to larger variations, to just wonder if this thing that you were told, it's like, is that though? Is that the case? Really? Like, is this how I actually want to do things or how I actually want to live my life. And you start scratching your head about that. And it's uncomfortable because then you start wondering if you've ever been sure of anything, or you start seeing things like certain perspectives of yourself come into play and you're like, well, that was quite the response to that right there. That was quite the desire to counteract some shit. And you can immediately feel like you have just been stripped of any and all experiences that you've ever had. And you're essentially fucking nothing, which isn't wrong in a sense either, because it isn't something to look to. Like, you're nothing in the sense that you're fresh, you're aware in the moment, but you're also nothing in the sense of fucking any idea that you're thinking about trying to fucking trying to buoy yourself, trying to fucking buoy something because you thought you had to, in response, instead of just being able to be nothing and just continue to be there and pay attention and be aware and look at reality not from a point of view necessarily, but just being willing to take it in, honestly take it in. And there's still, as much as right now, maybe I feel like I'm getting a good clear look. There's probably it's a relatively clear look. It's still not a clear look. There's still a lot that is on the sides and shades. I'm certainly not saying anything like that, but I get the digestibility components, and then seeing reasons, habitual patterns. You're like, well, this is you got to see those things to shift them and change them, and that's a lot of what feeling, looking at uncomfortable stuff is, because like if you don't see it, you can't shift it, and then it just continues on as another thing you keep doing. But it's like, no, look, yeah, look, and like, but it's incredibly informative, that's for sure. And it's like you don't have to create a new idea on top of that, because that's not doing you any good whatsoever. But just keep looking and responding closer and closer to how you want to respond.
Dude, I am grooving to the music that you were fucking spitting out. It's great, I gotta tell you. And it's just because it's fresh, it's clear, it's authentic as fuck, right? And again, you're gonna oscillate in and out of it, because you have to. Like, it's funny because if I was to be clear, I don't know if I'd be able to move. I don't know if I'd be able to do anything except just sit there with my mouth open, drooling, honestly. And it's just because every time I've been clear, it's jarring. It's really jarring, and I consider myself to be fairly clear, but in that statement itself is the evidence that I'm not. And so it really just comes down to recognizing that the you that you're thinking about being clear isn't the you that's being clear. And that's the trick right there, is to recognize that, again, that trajectory that's in your head of how Andrew's doing isn't the reality, right? That's the fog seeping back in so you can process the clarity, right? Because that's really it, because you're interacting with time, you're interacting with people, you're going through this experience of duality. And so in that is just this continuous recognition of both, the duality and the underlying unity, the fog and the clarity, because they coexist. It's not that it's not that one exists and then the other. They both exist at the same time. Right? And it's recognizing that it's your resistance to the fog that traps you in the fog. Right, because there is no fog. That's the funniest fucking part about it. That's the whole thing. Like, to the point where getting out of the fog becomes its own fog. It's very much the argument that Alan Watts was making about the ego, right? That transcending the ego becomes its own ego trip, right? It's in accepting the ego, which means recognizing it doesn't exist, right? It's in letting go of the story, letting go of the you getting somewhere, letting go of all of that. But to live in that state again is, especially when you haven't done it takes practice. For me, it took 20 years of going through shit. I'm still practicing. Admittedly, it's way easier now. Like I will just go for days and not even worry about shit at all. And then all of a sudden I'll have a thought where I'm just like, oh right, like my marriage that ended, how's my daughter doing? Oh my God, I'm dealing with finances, and all of a sudden all the story comes back in. I'm like, and then I recognize I'm like, I'm fucking doing it again. And it's not that I'm thinking again, it's that I'm thinking that it goes somewhere. Like I just fell back into the habit of going, yeah, that's gonna get me somewhere. That's going to make it all make sense. That's going to fucking make my life better. And it's just that level of commitment. But then all of a sudden you come through and or come to the other side and you're like, just fucking, all I can do is what's here. And that's always the case. All I can do is what's in front of me. Right. And this is why I say, or I've said previously, that while we do use psychedelics at the retreats, I almost never use psychedelics. And it's because at the end of the day, the insight always comes back around to shut up, move forward, try to enjoy yourself. That's pretty much it. It's quit your bitching, keep going, try to take it lightly. Because there really is nothing else. There is nothing else. People want to have soaring fucking psychedelic experiences of otherworldly beings and hyper intelligence talking to them and all this shit. And they're just missing their time in the garden. Right? And your time in the garden really just comes down to attention. And then it all makes sense.
Yeah, like that. It's just this. It's just this. Hits in so many different ways and forms because, you go and the fact that they both exist here, like the potential for hell and the potential for heaven and that not even being because it doesn't mean, heaven, especially coming from fucking comfort, dude. It's pinned as this fucking paradise, and that's not it. Like, it's not fun. That is not fun. Like, what the fuck? Why are we trying to just be fucking comfortable all the time? It's not like fun is like jumping in, having an interaction, being like, I don't know where this is going to go. This right now is fun. We're going back and forth. I don't know what you're going to say next. I don't know what's going to happen in the chat. I don't know how someone's going to look at this. I don't know what I'm going to say next. Like that's fun and so it's not even about, if feeling good. You can still fucking enjoy things as best you can without necessarily feeling amazing. And oh man, the after all, like going through whatever things and then like realizing that it's still this, like this is like you being here interacting, which right now I'm feeling like I just got dropped into this situation. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Why am I talking into this microphone? Why is there, what is there, 15 people listening right now? Who is this guy that I'm talking to? Like, and there isn't anything that has to be like, oh well, what do you do now? It's like be yourself, like keep going as best you can. Like, and the psychedelics, like realizing that that's just what it comes back to. There isn't this sort of additional thing. Like there isn't more because the intensity of this situation right now that I just felt like I felt for a second, it's like the more than just this. But when it's just this, it's like this is my responsibility. This is the attention to be paid to. It's not everything surrounding this, the potential that could come from this, what led to this, where this may go, how this could be perceived, because I can't know that at all. I can't know how I'm heard, how I'm looked at, how I'm interacted with. You can't know how you're looked at or interacted with. So it gets it all that almost starts to make it harder and harder to look around for a right thing, a right way, instead of just trusting yourself, because that's equally as unknown. You just as much don't know the response to finding a rule book and like, all right, well, step one, step two, step three. That's equally as uncertain as you just like fucking tossing that shit. And you're like, all right, I'm here. I'm doing my best based on what I've, been through, gone through, and I'm expressing that as best as I can, and you're expressing that as best as you can. And there isn't a bar they have to set for yourself. There isn't some idea that you use to buoy yourself that then sets a fucking expectation for yourself on the other end that you're then simultaneously trying to look at and live up to, because you still don't feel like you're that at all, because deep down you really feel like a little fucking baby, a little peeled back baby. But as you know, lean into fucking that a little bit, or at least recognize that you're not that thing, the bar comes with it. And then you can actually just be in situations without an expectation of yourself to be something, to need to be something, because you're using something to build, to build yourself. Like, dude, I don't know who I am at all. And I've thought I was something for a fucking bit. And it's, oh my God. And right. It's like, and so it goes. And so we keep going, thinking then it's like something happens and I think I'm this, and then something else happens and I think I'm that. It's like, it's still not that. But if when you're not holding on so much to certain perspectives to, feel a little bit better, it's like, you don't need to, because the bar comes with you. You're that bar. You're the one. I'm the one setting expectations for myself for how to do things, how to, jump into a situation and interact in a situation. You know, I'm the one setting that bar. You're the one setting that bar for yourself. I'm always the one setting my own bar, and it doesn't have to be set.
I'm really enjoying this. I just want you to know that, and because it's, again, it's so much better than people talking about source consciousness or chakras or frequencies or 5D or dimensions or pyramids or aliens or any of that shit. It's just so funny, right? Because to me, this is it. Just it's just this, and then dealing with that. Because then all of a sudden you're like, okay, hold up. There's a lot. There's a lot that I got to process here. Because if you're not settling on assumptions, like that it's you processing this, for example, then there's a lot to fucking think about. There's a lot that's going to go through, and it's just going to keep going through. It's going to keep going through forever. Right. And that's life. That's existence. And that's what we're all trying to run from. It's like, I just want to break from all this shit. It's like, no, what you need to break from is your resistance to that shit. Right? Your commitment to that shit, the investment you've put in that shit. It's not that you need a break from your thoughts. It's not that you need a break from your feelings. It's not that you need a break from that so much that comes with clarity, because you are enough to take it. Of course you are. It's you. Right? If you're getting tired, it's because you're doing something that's making it heavy. This is one of my favorite insights from learning Wing Chun. If you're getting tired, you're doing it wrong. And it's because it's supposed to be relaxed, right? And so the same is very much true for our responses to things. Like, you don't have to get exhausted by every conflict that goes through your life. You don't have to be in conflict with the conflict. You don't have to be in conflict with anything, including the conflict that's going on in your life. You're like, well, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm dealing with. And then it's gone. And then you keep moving forward. And that's it. That's all this comes down to. You are always everything that you've become till now. How do you add to that? Keep going. Right? But if you're trying to add what you think you need, then you are totally discounting everything that your reality is trying to teach you by virtue of it being you. Isn't that funny? Right? We get in the way of our own lessons in the same way that we get in the way of being other people's lessons. Like right now, you feel like you are coming to a point of clarity, that you are feeling very humble, that you are feeling, very grounded, let's just say. And the funniest part about that is that it's not you at all. This is the product of every conversation up until now, of everybody's input, of the listener living their own life, whether they've talked to us directly or anybody in the community whatsoever. This is all a cascade. This is all a ripple. This is all something that's happening to what is, because you are what is. Right? And this is why it's exciting to me. And this is why often I've went back to that moment in my life where all of a sudden just went, oh my God, I've not been living for me. I didn't even know there was a me to live for. I didn't even know what the fuck that meant. Holy fucking shit. And it was massive. It just fucking hit like a motherfucker. And when I look at the trajectory of my life up until that point, there is no reason for it. It was a fucking miracle. To this day, I consider it to be miraculous. On the trajectory I was on, in the same way that you feel. You're like, fuck, like, oh my God, this could have been fucking brutal. I could have been lost in this shit forever, assuming it didn't kill me. Right. And so to this day, it's like, I woke up, and that's kind of tongue in cheek, because as much as I'm like, yeah, okay, it comes from a point of responsibility. Who's taking responsibility? And it's a whole other question, and life becomes just this process of going through, and that's when connection really becomes apparent. Like, the empathy that you're feeling right now for every single person who's lost in that shit, every single one of us that's going through it, whether it's consistently or from moment to moment, you can feel the drag. You can feel the fucking chains when you start living relative to your assumptions of the world, when you start investing in a perception, not just a perception of yourself, but of the world, of the universe that you're a part of. You can feel that shit. And that's what drives me. That's why I look at dualistic unity, and I'm just in awe all the time, because this is what we're talking about. This is what circles around in this conversation. It is the fact that it's not about the conversation, which means there's a genuine change, which is why the retreats are so much fun, is because people go there and all of a sudden they go, well, these two guys aren't talking to me about, and like, they're not trying to teach me shit. They're not like, gather around, children, let's talk about consciousness. They're not channeling source energy. They're not trying to answer all my questions. They're going, do you want to go for a walk? How would you want to play some shuffleboard? Have you ever played pool? How about some karaoke? And it's not because we're trying to distract ourselves, but because we recognize any weight that we bring moment to moment to moment is weight that we want to bring. Right. And sometimes that happens at retreats. People will come with weight that they are using the retreat as an opportunity to let go of. Because that's what we're doing in all of the situations in our life. We're using them as opportunities to either let go of or hold on to something based on our intentions, based on our commitments. And that's why the retreats are so goddamn powerful, because they are very symbolic of the fact that you could just be here. You can just be here, and we can be just be here, and everything unravels, and you will have insights, and you will have moments, and you will have fucking incredible experiences just being here, as opposed to trying to get somewhere. And so by the time the retreat ends, everybody's just ready to go out into their life, very much with the feeling of, I could just choose. Yeah, this can be about me. But the depth of that is what you continue to take in. To this day, I still continue to recognize, how much I get caught up thinking relative. It's just that now I kind of find it funny, because you're just like, oh yeah, I can see where that is. I see why that's useful too.
Oh, brother, man. Holy Christ. Like, how good the retreats have been for me in ways that I don't even know if I fully know. Like, because if we create ideas in response to other ideas, all the ideas are there, and like who we are is still there. Like, it's still there. It's just that in certain environments we can keep that at bay a lot more. I couldn't keep the reality of me at bay at the retreats. I wasn't able to. That's why I've had such a tough time. Anyone who's been there, I don't know. I don't know, how it's perceived or how it's looked at, but I fucking have a tough time because that's the me that I created something on top of to feel better about that. The kid that felt like he never had anything to say, nothing of value to share, hesitated before jumping, afraid, just afraid, scared, just fucking scared to jump because out of fear of how it's going to look, how it's going to be perceived, fear of the judgment without even fucking getting it, keeping that before there's even an opportunity for it to be the case. And so it's just a hell within myself, And that's what you can create and look at. And it's like each and every time fucking chipping away, chip, 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 chip at that fucking thing, whatever the fuck that was that I've been able to feel like I built starting from when I was a teenager in different ways, trying different ways to just fucking feel better about that deeper shit. Something's going to work. It's got to be being good at this thing or succeeding at this thing or accomplishing this thing or gaining this thing or being looked at in this way. It's got to be something. Something's got to fucking work. No, none of them. None of them worked, but you can do that and you can even fucking structure an environment where you just don't even face situations where that thing is questioned. Because along the way, as you go through, say, college, for example, for me, like go to a good school, play a sport, all that stuff, then you start interacting more and more with people from that similar environment, using that similar thing as a potentially a coping mechanism for their stuff, a means of feeling a little bit better, gaining a whether it's a title at work, graduating from a certain school, accomplishing a certain thing, being looked at in a certain way. And I'm not saying I know anything. I'm just talking for myself and my strategies for not getting out of the shit, but just covering it up, covering that shit up just over and over and over and over. And each and every time we've had a retreat, it's been chipping away at that cover of what's there. And all my excuses as to why I was acting that way, why I wasn't, letting go, being myself, why I was still afraid. And like, well, this isn't, I don't want this to be happening now. I'd rather be doing, you know, something. And it's like, it's not even, it's like the reality of me wanted it. The reality of me wanted that kid, that remembers fucking just chilling the fuck out, not trying to be something, not thinking about myself so goddamn much. I wanted all of this, all
Yeah,
of
you've been working a long time to get here. We all are. That's the point. Because we remember. It just got buried. Some of us just lost hope. We just, it's Shangri-La. It's this place to get back to after we die. Or after enlightenment, right? But no, we're working our way out of it. Just, like I was explaining for years that I felt like I was just covered up with blankets. Like there was a flame that was flickering, but it was ultimately just being snuffed out by all this weight on top of it. And the weight's being removed and the flame's starting to burn. But it's because, it never went out. It never went out, regardless of how much it was covered up. And that's kind of the point. It'll find its way through. Just keep burning. Just keep burning. I wanted to mention, because it is 15 minutes before we end this episode, we will be continuing on Patreon after this, but the California mini retreat ticket that was up for grabs has been won. It's been won. We haven't talked to the person as yet, so I'm not going to declare their name publicly because they may not want that, in fact. But we will reach out to them via email later on today and let them know that they have won a free single bunk at the California mini retreat on April 11th to April 15th. Just want everyone to know there are 3 bunks left, and they're really reasonably priced. So if you want to get into this California mini retreat, we're going to be at Big Bear Lake. It's going to be fucking dope. But there are only those 3 tickets left, I believe. It's possible there is a king bed left in the top shared room, and I just want to make this clear: that top shared room has 5 beds in it. Okay, it's like a big fucking clubhouse. There's a king bed and there's 4 single beds. So if you want to go, it's going to be like the sleepover room. It's going to be the room where people are fucking whispering and gabbing into the night, I'm sure. The 4 single beds have already been taken by all awesome people. The king bed remains, I believe, unless that changed as of this morning. But then we have the 3 bunks that are available. Those are going to go quick. So definitely jump on board, get that quickly. As well, we're going to be releasing tickets to our Colorado mini retreat later on today to our tier 3 supporters on Patreon. Which is going to be just great. The Colorado mini retreat is going to be happening from May 30th to June 3rd. And it is once again going to be very 420 friendly. We've got a place that we can actually smoke cannabis inside. There's a movie theater, pool table, hot tub out back. A lot of shit happened at this location. The last time that we were there, it was ground zero for a lot of what Andrew's been going through ever since. I'm really looking forward to our triumphant return, because you see, that's the thing, is that you're stripping all this shit down, and you're realizing, like, oh fuck, I've been underneath all this time. Everybody's trying to get to clarity. Everybody wants to do the ice baths. They want to do the meditations. They want to do the yoga. They want to find some practice that's going to help them achieve clarity, rather than understanding that clarity is always here. It's recognizing the illusion that you create that releases you. You can try and zoom past it to clarity, but the illusion is going to creep back in. And so you need to be able to look at it, recognize it, not judge it, accept its role. And through that, it starts to disperse. Because it was never an enemy. It was always a tool. It was always a coping mechanism. It was always a way for you to find yourself before being overwhelmed by how much that is.
Dude. Oh, yeah, I'm gaining an appreciation for that, taking chunks, taking bites, but oh my God, I thought of myself in a certain way for like this is yeah, I'm I know. And even now as I'm talking, I'm like, fucking A, I'm talking about myself a lot on this episode. Like we chill with that. There's other shit to do. And,
It's kind of the point, isn't it?
yeah, I know. And it's like, and that's all I can know is my experience. And like, fucking for a lot of my life, it's been very, very, very self-involved in a lot of ways. And so there are moments where I feel like I fucking don't know anything at all whatsoever. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's like being, and, and it's exciting. It's exciting, it's like I feel like even just right now, like being able to see myself on the screen, like I see someone else. Like I have not seen this. And it's trippy as fuck, dude. It's trippy as fuck. Cause like it's been such a veil up until like straight up, like I feel like this week and some, I've laughed. We've done the commentary stuff. I laugh about the fucking commentary stuff at this point now because like the commentary episodes where I'm seeing like because I'm like in so many ways still holding on to a perspective, and I know, but like, and I don't even know if what I'm doing right now at
Trying to
all,
find a
but
prop.
that's such a good point. Oh, I know, and I'm trying to figure out, like,
Dude, I
well,
get
if
it.
I'm not
Like, you don't know, man. I sit in this state of existential bliss, and yet I have, like, this underlying melancholy that goes with it because they both go hand in hand. Like, you're just like, "This is so amazing and yet so tragic." It's just so hard to reconcile. You're like, "Surely there's a reason I'm feeling both of these things." Like, because we're like, "No, I should be just feeling joy." It's like, no, 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 no. That's not how this works." Okay? They both inform each other. Every moment, every moment is a split, and I've said this before, between the loss of what you're experiencing and the joy of something new. Mhm. Every moment you've experienced, you'll never experience again, but it always leads to something you haven't experienced yet. And that's the duality. Right? It's the fear of loss and the joy of gain. And they both exist here and now. They're both options. And the same way is the split between the fear of being alone and the freedom of being alone. Those are also the two perspectives of here and now. And so we always ride that razor thin edge, but we feel both when we're truly here. It's just that we tend to want to choose one, and then the pendulum swings and kicks us in the ass.
sometimes those ass kickings are beautifully aggressive and forceful, but the back and the forth, you're not wrong about that, the fear of being alone and the freedom of being alone, because that can whack back and forth moment to moment to moment, and as soon as there's even in moments of the freedom of being alone, like, something happens and all of a sudden you're afraid being alone, but they're both there, neither are the truth in the way that I think about them necessarily. It's just when I'm not so much, then it's both are there. Both are there, and you can't have one without the other. The freedom of being alone doesn't come without the fear of being alone or the potential for it. Because it's just the reality of being alone. Is it freedom? Is it fear? Am I excited by this? Because now I'm just interacting with myself all the time, and there's a response. Absolutely. And in moments of clarity, it's like, whoa, this is fun. This is exciting. And then as soon as it's like, but I'm alone and there's nothing to look to and there's no one to look to and there's no one to inform this and there's no measurement as I go moment to moment feeling very free, like I am just interacting with myself. There's no one to tell me if I'm doing anything right or wrong. There's no one to tell me if I'm doing things well or poorly. So moment to moment I'm just interacting, I'm just talking, I'm just interacting with myself with no ability whatsoever to know how that's going. So I'll create one. I'll make an assumption about that just to cut down on that. But until that's there, it's like there isn't so much a reason to continue or to hesitate. And it's like they're both options moment to moment. And it's just where I'm falling in that moment on that spectrum of self-doubt to not. Like, oh, this random thing that's popping into my head, waffles and syrup and how good it would be to make an egg sandwich out of a waffle on each side with syrup on it. That's interesting. I've never thought about waffle egg sandwich before, about a McGriddle from McDonald's, but it's like just that's a random fucking thing that as I was saying, what's the next thought that I'm going to have? Pops in. Who the fuck's to say that that isn't a direction that you can take something? And that right there, that willingness to jump into something I have held myself back from doing that my entire life. It seems like, oh, that's not worth saying. That's a silly thing to bring up. That doesn't make any sense. That's not a logical thing to express or to say. Like you couldn't just jump in yourself without an idea of, what to do in it. But you can. But you can.
I just had just a really interesting thought. When we first got here to this planet, we didn't know how to speak. We just screamed. Like we would just scream. And you would think after a little while we'd actually start to judge ourselves, like, oh fuck, I'm not saying the right thing. I'm not saying it the right way. And then they're like trying to teach us the letters. So I wonder, How much of that is just residual? Like I'm not saying the right thing. I don't know how to express this properly. I don't know how to interact with this reality. I need to learn more. I need to learn more about how to express it, more what to say, more how to say it, right? That's just really interesting because again, that's one point we were just like, ah, and they're like, "What? Are you hungry? Did you shit? What's happening?" Right? We had no way of communicating it whatsoever, and that would have been really frustrating, as we all know. As we all know, this has been a fucking hell of an episode, by the way. I just want to give a shout out to Andrew for coming to the table this morning with just just fucking authentic ass shit to say. Clear as a bell, man. Like clear as a bell. And it's so funny because you're like, I feel like I'm just talking about myself. And every single person in the comment section is like, I feel like you're talking about me. And it's because this is the shit that we're going through. It's so funny because I go through this too, where like people will come to us or they'll talk to me and be like, man, I feel like you were just talking directly to me in that episode. It's like, well, I am sort of, maybe not in the way that you're thinking. It's because I'm actually just talking to myself. I'm actually just going through my own shit. I'm just working through it as authentically as possible. That's why I'm always very careful about getting caught up in myself. But you'll notice the reason I sound so quote unquote confident is because it's my shit. It's because I'm not regurgitating somebody else's crap to anyone. I'm not going, oh, yeah, there's 7 chakras because some asshole in the past said so. I'm not saying, like there's certain vibrations because some asshole in the past said so. I'm not saying anything that doesn't fucking come from me and from my experience because that's the only shit that works. Everything else is just following in the desperate hope that someone's going to make this make sense to you. And then you'll make sense out of the bullshit that you take in, but only because you need to. Only because you want something to hold on to. Right? And the alternative to that is recognizing you don't know. You never know. Ever. And then take in everything. Everything that comes across your path. Because all it's going to do is lead to more shit you didn't know. Which informs you, which raises your context, which raises your awareness, which changes everything about your path. But trying to understand and see certain things and only very specific things that you have dictated to be useful to you keeps you in a box. Right? To suddenly recognize that, yeah, you are responsible for your life. You are responsible for every response in every moment. And that response is always, again, dualistic: fear or acceptance. You're running from it or you're embracing it. Right? And if you're running from it, why? And if you're embracing it, why? Is it for a reason or is it because it's here now and it's part of your experience? Or are you trying to become more? Because that's what takes away from you. Isn't it funny? We have this journey to empowerment that disempowers us by virtue of its existence entirely. We have about 2 minutes here. I just want to say thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, man. This is exactly the conversation that I didn't even know I needed this morning. So fucking A.
Oh goodness, dude. It's funny because I can't fathom how someone could hear everything I said and think that I was talking about them because it was straight up just like everything I've been feeling and going through. And that's as you said, like people are resonating with it. Like that's really trippy to me in a lot of ways. But I guess it's a component of actually like being honest and authentic, which is beautiful because then that's always the case. It's always the case. And that assumption of being more, oh my God. It's like you can hold on to that moment to moment. Is this thing that I'm gonna say something to make myself more, or I'm not going to out of fear of saying being less? And this constant fucking back and forth and sitting in a situation and recognizing, oh my God, I'm uncomfortable right now because I'm trying to be more than I am. Like, what does that mean? What am I talking about? Being more? Like, what is more than what?
It's a good way to spend eternity. Gives you something to do.
It does.
That's
It
it, though.
does.
It's the recognition of that. Man, this is going to be a fucking dope Patreon call. If you're not on Patreon and you would like to join us, we have a 7-day free trial. We are that confident that you will fucking love it. We chat 5 days a week, and this one's going to be a good one. So we're going to wrap up here. Thank you, everyone. There's some exciting shit coming up. I went to my daughter's concert this weekend for Fidelium, and we recently interviewed her teacher, well, the head of Fidelium, one of them, and that episode is going to be coming out soon. I might share some of the concert on today's Patreon call if anybody's interested, and we're going to release, of course, the details for the Colorado retreat to our Tier 3 supporters. But this has been a blast, man. Thank you, everyone. We will see you soon.
Bye, everyone.